In the tapestry of Japanese history, the samurai warrior stands as a symbol of unwavering loyalty, relentless discipline, and an unmatched mastery of the blade. But behind these fearsome fighters stood another figure, equally crucial, yet shrouded in a different kind of mystique: the swordsmith. These artisans were not mere craftsmen. They were revered as artists, and among these artists, a few names throughout history managed to stand head and shoulders above the rest. Perhaps the most renowned name among them all is Masamune, a man whose blades continue to be revered as some of the finest ever crafted in Japan, and indeed the world. At least in terms of his status as a legend of his craft, Masamune is still pretty much unmatched as a swordsmith. No one ever seemed to quite reach the same level of fame that he did, except for one swordsmith who is often mentioned in the same breath as Masamune, one that was undoubtedly very skilled at his craft, and yet became famous, or infamous I should say, for a whole different set of reasons. Muramasa. Active as a swordsmith during Japan's Warring States period, and especially violent time period even by Japanese standards, Muramasa's blades gained recognition for their incredible sharpness and efficiency in battle. But according to some, those qualities came with a price. Muramasa was said to be a man haunted by his inner demons, a mind verging on madness, who created swords that craved bloodshed and violence. Before a Muramasa blade could be returned to its scabbard, it was said, it had to draw the blood of an enemy, and sometimes even that of the owner himself. Muramasa swords were said to be cursed, haunting their bearers with an insatiable thirst for violence. At least, that's what countless myths and legends want us to believe. But myths and legends are oftentimes based on true events, and the story of Muramasa and his cursed swords is no exception. In this case, a series of true, very unfortunate events, connected to one of Japanese history's most powerful samurai clans, provides the background for a myth that to this day finds its way into popular media all over the world. So, today, I would like to find out who this Muramasa guy actually was, and how, over the course of multiple centuries, his deadly creations became so respected and yet so feared. If you end up enjoying this video, you should definitely leave a like and subscribe just to make sure that you don't miss out on any future Japanese crime and history content. Oh, and visit the link below if you wish to support me even further on my Patreon for as little as $1 per month. But with that out of the way, let's get back to the video, shall we? This is the story of Muramasa, Japan's most feared swordsmith. Before we get into curses and all that stuff, let's find out who Muramasa the Swordsmith actually was. Because believe me, the answer is not that straightforward. Pinning down details about historical figures from centuries past can be like chasing smoke. Birth dates, birthplaces, even the date that they shuffled off their mortal coil, all up for grabs depending on who you ask. Usually though, it's the minor details that tend to go a bit fuzzy as the years go by. But Muramasa? This guy is a total enigma, in many ways. Here's what we do know. Muramasa I, also known as Sengo Muramasa, was born sometime during the 15th century. Some sources claim that he started his career as a student of Kyoto-based swordsmith Heiansho Nagayoshi as early as 1428, while others place the date of his swordsmithing debut as late as the 1490s. Some legends would like us to believe that Muramasa was, in fact, a student of the great Masamune. But in reality, they lived at least a full 100 years apart from each other. The earliest known sword, signed with both the name Muramasa and a date, was created in 1501. But some of his other swords, which were merely inscribed with a name but no date, are at least suspected to be maybe a couple of years older than that. One thing, however, is very important to keep in mind throughout this whole video. When people talk about swords made by Muramasa, they usually talk about more than just one specific person. Rather, blades engraved with the name Muramasa were made by either Muramasa I or one of his disciples. To make a long story short, Muramasa I, and maybe even his second or third generation disciples, had been active by the early 16th century, and oftentimes it is actually the second generation of the Muramasa swordsmithing school which is regarded as having been the most skilled of them all. But what if the first and second generation were actually one and the same? That's what Fujishiro Matsuo, one of the most revered Japanese sword polishers ever, theorized. He claimed that what we now consider to be Muramasa I and Muramasa II might as well have been one person who had an extraordinarily long career in swordsmithing, honing his skills to an extremely high level. An interesting theory, but also one that only adds to the confusion about Muramasa's true identity. Theories aside though, the Muramasa school created some truly extraordinary swords and is said to have survived for at least 3 entire generations. When exactly the school disappeared is, you guessed it, up for debate. But there are some swords verified as Muramasa school creations that have been dated to the mid to late 1600s. The school's location, in connection with the time period that it had been active in, is essential to the story of Muramasa and his cursed swords. His forge was located in Kuwana, a city in Ise province, which was in close proximity to Mikawa province, home to the Matsudaira clan, which back then was a relatively small clan surrounded by much bigger ones. That was until the mid-1500s, when the clan's leader Matsudaira Motoyasu aligned himself with Oda Nobunaga, the lord of nearby Owari province, who was well on his way to uniting all of Japan under his banner. Matsudaira Motoyasu later became Tokugawa Ieyasu, a name that probably rings a bell for everyone even remotely interested in Japanese history. He is considered to be one of the 3 great unifiers of Japan, after all. He is also very important to the story of the Muramasa school and their swords. Japan was in the middle of the Sengoku period, probably the most violent time period in a country's already violent history. And because Muramasa's forge in Ise province was in such close proximity to Mikawa, they were chosen as one of the main suppliers of blades for the Matsudaira, or Tokugawa clan. Swords, or good swords to be precise, were in high demand, and the name Muramasa was synonymous with incredible sharpness and quality. And yet, Tokugawa Ieyasu, who basically united Japan with the help of Muramasa-produced swords, reportedly developed a deep-rooted disdain for these exact blades. And that is where the supposed curse surrounding Muramasa and his swords comes in, originating from a series of unfortunate events that began all the way back in 1535, before Ieyasu was even born. When his grandfather and 7th generation leader of the Matsudaira clan, Matsudaira Kiyoyasu, was heading into battle with the Oda clan of Owari province, a rumor started circulating. Abe Sadayoshi, one of his most loyal retainers, was planning to betray the Matsudaira clan. Despite immediately dismissing the rumors, Kiyoyasu sought to meet personally with Sadayoshi, but instead, he encountered the retainer's son, who was under the belief that his father faced imminent execution. In a moment of panic, the son struck the leader of the Matsudaira clan, severing his earlobe and delivering a second blow as he tried to escape. It is said that the second strike basically cut Kiyoyasu clean in half, entering his body at the right shoulder and exiting the body at the left hip. Later investigations also revealed that the weapon used for the murder was an oversized katana engraved with the name Muramasa. Then, in 1549, Matsudaira Hirotada, the son of Kiyoyasu and the father of Tokugawa Ieyasu, wasn't killed by a Muramasa blade, but it was pretty damn close. One night, he was woken up by the sound of steps in the hall outside of his private chambers, and fearing for his life, Hirotada stepped outside with his sword in hand, and before he knew it, he lost control over his legs, which were cut open and completely covered in blood. The perpetrator was later caught and revealed to have been the incredibly skilled, but also incredibly drunk Iwamatsu Hachiya, a man who had killed countless enemies in the name of the Matsudaira clan. The sword that was used to seriously injure Matsudaira Hirotada was, of course, a Muramasa creation. While his father was almost fatally injured, Tokugawa Ieyasu spent most of his childhood as a political hostage. When he was 7 years old, he injured himself with a small knife, which was later revealed to have been made by, you guessed it, Muramasa. 3 generations of the Matsudaira family had been either killed or injured by a Muramasa blade at that point, but there was more to come. The quote-unquote curse even continued with Nobuyasu, the son of Ieyasu. Accused of potentially being a traitor, Nobuyasu was forced to take his own life in the ritual of seppuku. By his own father, by the way. The blade that tragically ended his life was also a creation of... you get the idea. At first glance, these events truly do seem like more than sheer coincidence. Was the family of Tokugawa Ieyasu actually the victim of an evil curse brought upon them by the swords of Muramasa and his disciples? That idea certainly resonated with large parts of the Japanese population, because legends and tales about the supposed curse started circulating even before Tokugawa Ieyasu had passed away. The Mikawa go Furoki, an early 17th century text about the history and ancestry of the Tokugawa clan, was one of the first texts to make the connection between the clan's aforementioned misfortunes and the Muramasa blades, but certainly not the last. But more on that a bit later. The Battle of Sekigahara, fought in 1600, is often considered to be the beginning of both the Tokugawa shogunate, or military government, as well as the strict but relatively peaceful and prosperous Edo period. As the term Tokugawa shogunate already implies, the Tokugawa clan was in control during this 250 years long period, and the first shogun of the family to rule over Japan was Tokugawa Ieyasu. It is widely believed that Ieyasu, now in a position to actually do so, had some sort of ban placed on all swords made by Muramasa. While the actual existence of a formal ban seems to be a very contentious topic among historians, some historical records do lend credibility to this belief. Take for instance the case of a Nagasaki magistrate and his son in 1632. Facing exile for alleged crimes, their situation seemed serious enough. However, they had a way bigger problem than initially thought. When authorities confiscated their belongings, a total of 24 Muramasa blades were found. A discovery which reportedly completely altered the fate of both the father and the son, as both were now forced to end their own lives by committing seppuku instead. True or not, this and a few other stories seem to have had quite the impact on the Japanese population. With rumors of a supposed ban on Muramasa blades floating around, some owners opted to part ways with their swords completely. You know, just in case. Others found a more creative solution to this problem. The easiest way of identifying a sword back then was to simply check the swordsmith's signature located on the tang of the sword. So what if you simply altered the signature? Well, that is exactly what many Muramasa sword owners chose to do, and there were actually quite a few ways of doing so. Some simply hammered at the poor thing until one of the kanji letters was gone, while others had a more subtle approach, carefully removing one of the kanji letters and replacing it with another one to create signatures such as Muramune, Hiromasa, or Muratada. My personal favorite though is changing the signature from Muramasa to Masamune, which made it seem like the sword was actually made by Japan's most beloved swordsmith. Now that is smart. How serious this supposed ban actually was though, that's up to debate. Some choose to refer to it as more of a quote-unquote quasi-ban, with Muramasa swords seemingly still having been considered a prized possession throughout the whole Edo period. They were also still openly carried around in many cases, with no repercussions whatsoever, sometimes even by samurai who were very close to the Tokugawa family. Not only that, but Tokugawa Ieyasu himself owned a very unique-looking Muramasa-produced sword which still remains in the family's collection to this day. It's safe to assume that Ieyasu probably wasn't as frightened by Muramasa as the legends would like us to believe. I would say he was maybe a bit traumatized by what happened between his family and these swords. But honestly, that's kind of understandable, isn't it? The truth is, Muramasa-produced swords obviously weren't actually cursed. They were just incredibly common amongst members of the Tokugawa clan and their retainers. As mentioned before, the Muramasa Forge in Ise province was geographically close to the Tokugawa's lands and was renowned for its exceptional swordcraft. Given this proximity, it's honestly unsurprising that many of the murders and attempted murders of Tokugawa clan leaders involved Muramasa blades, which were likely among the finest available in that region. I think that pretty much explains the whole curse thing. But despite this, captivating news stories and legends about the Muramasa curse continued to capture the public imagination. These tales then spread through word of mouth, but also managed to find their way onto the kabuki stage. The first of many wildly successful kabuki plays inspired by the Muramasa curse came in 1797, with a story that was based on a true historical event that occurred in 1696. A wealthy samurai called Sano Chiro Saemon suddenly lost his mind and killed a few dozen prostitutes in Edo's, or modern-day Tokyo's, red light district. And at least in the kabuki play, it was of course the perpetrator's sword, made by Muramasa, that fueled his descent into violence. Then there was the true story of Matsudaira Geki, a young samurai and guard at Edo Castle who was frequently bullied by his seniors. In 1823, he finally gave in to his frustrations, murdered 3 men, wounded 2 more, and then ended his own life via seppuku. Some later claimed that Matsuda Irageki also carried a Muramasa blade. You know, because that was obviously the problem, not the toxic work environment. For the most part, all of these myths and legends about murder and evil curses were meant to instill a sense of fear in listeners. In some cases though, these same exact stories had the opposite effect. The Muramasa sword became a symbol to many, a symbol of resistance against the shogunate. Because of their complex history with the Tokugawa clan, they came to be seen as a historical reminder of those who dared to oppose the shogun's family. And this association deeply resonated with those who harbored feelings of opposition to Japan's military government. Feelings that culminated in the legendary Boshin War of 1868 and 1869. This civil war marked a huge turning point in Japanese history. After more than 2.5 centuries, the Tokugawa shogunate was finally overthrown by the imperial court, restoring power to the emperor and bringing Japan into a whole new era. Prince Arisugawa Taruhito, a commander-in-chief of Emperor Meiji's army, witnessed the whole thing and was present when Edo Castle, and with it the capital, was handed over to the imperial forces. Prince Arisugawa Taruhito reportedly carried a Muramasa during the Boshin War, at a time when the meaning of the katana had become almost exclusively symbolic. Was Taruhito aware of the anti-shogunate symbolism surrounding his own sword? Maybe, maybe not, but either way, the story of Muramasa had now come full circle. The Tokugawa shogunate had, despite a troubled history with these swords, established itself as the rulers of Japan with the help of Muramasa blades. And now, those same swords help bring down the Tokugawa shogunate. It's almost poetic when you think about it. The curse of Muramasa is relevant even nowadays, maybe even more so than ever before. Some of these swords are now worth millions due to their sheer beauty and of course their historical significance. But the story of Muramasa has also managed to become an integral part of pop culture, both in and even outside of Japan. From anime to the Marvel universe, everyone seems to draw inspiration from this unique part of Japanese history which seems to perfectly blur the lines between myth and reality, reminding us of the cultural and historical impact that even a mere swordsmith could have on his own country. What's your favorite pop culture reference to Muramasa? Let me know in the comments down below. A shoutout goes to all my Patreon supporters listed here, including Busner, Bobby Wu, Javier Soravia, Capybara Chuck, Turam, White Gilden, Justin Down, and Yoko the Space Whale. And to all of you who stuck around until the very end, thank you so much for watching. Sayonara.